So we're here with Raj, the chef sommelier at Restaurant Danielle on 65th between Madison and Park Avenues in Manhattan. Raj, thanks for taking the time to meet with us.
Delighted to be here.
Now you're going to have to go ahead and supply me with your last name. It's always a little difficult for me to say.
Sure, Vaidya.
Raj is one of the top sommeliers here in Manhattan. He has been at Restaurant Danielle for how long have you been?
A shade over 2 years now.
It's been 2 years, a really nice period of time to set in motion his own stamp on the program. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the restaurant?
Sure. Well, this restaurant has been here at this location on 65th Street since 1999, but the original Danielle previously at 76th Street, so Restaurant Danielle has existed since 1993, shortly after Chef Danielle left Le Cirque to open his own restaurant. It's historically one of the most beautiful and exceptional restaurants in New York and all of the states, truly one of those grand restaurants of the French tradition. And it has another historic reference point because Danielle used to work at Le Cirque before moving on to create his own restaurant, Restaurant Danielle. And in 1999, he moved Danielle back into the original Le Cirque space. So in fact, we're in the same building that the original Le Cirque was in. Danielle is a modern yet classic French cuisine. We have a prefix menu of 3 courses and also offer tasting menus. These menus change with the seasons, obviously, and they definitely have a slant towards the cuisine of the northern Rhone Valley in the area of Lyon, where Danielle comes from.
And how do you find that in terms of pairing with wine? When I worked here, there was a lot of emphasis on Chateauneuf de Pape, Burgundy and Bordeaux. Where does the list move these days? What is it that you're serving quite frequently to guests?
Quite a bit of the focus has moved away from Bordeaux and heavier Chateauneufs to the northern Rhone and to Burgundy. Of course, the list is pretty extensive and expansive, so we have wines from the New World, a lot of wine from California, Oregon, and the such. Lots of wine from other countries in Europe, but the focus is still very much French. It's about 70% French total. 50% of our entire inventory probably is Burgundy, and the big focus is Burgundy. The big number in terms of sales is Burgundy. I find that both white and red Burgundy go very well with the cuisine here. It's a cuisine of a light touch. The dishes don't have a great deal of rusticity to them. They're a lot more focused, clean, and they desire a wine that really brings that those flavors into focus, and also that character of wines from specific vineyards, which you see a little bit less from other parts of the world, for sure.
So you like terroir wines?
Indeed,
you know,
site-specific wines that have a distinctive expression. Because after all, there are so-called terroir wines that may not have an individuality, but that's the intention behind the wine program here.
And when you're thinking about what to pair with the food, it's really about a little bit of a light touch. You're not looking for high extract, or what is it?
Exactly. I like wines to be delicate and pretty, and to accompany and accentuate the experience of the food and the experience of dining. Wine by itself can be a fantastic beverage, but I try and avoid serving beverage wines because I find that they tend to remove some aspect of the experience from the whole experience of dining. I think the same thing is true for food, and I trust and love the fact that the chefs are excellent at really creating a seamless food experience and then melding it with wine. I speak with the chefs about menus all the time. They're very responsive and very respectful about the whole dining experience, and that's really something that comes from the boss. Danielle is one of the few people who really understands the idea that when one comes to dinner, they're not just going to have a meal, but they're going to a show, and the whole experience is to be had together.
I really think that's true. He's one of the great producers of restaurants that I've ever seen, right, in terms of just every aspect is attended to. Is there a great cheese? Is there a great service? Do we have wonderful dessert wines? It seems like he really wants.
Do we have great lighting? Do we have great spacing in the tables? He really sees the big picture.
The big picture,
which I respect a great deal.
It's almost like old school Hollywood producers, you know, like someone running MGM back in the heyday. You know, it's
indeed. I'm looking at pictures that were in Danielle's office right now, actually, with the kitchen behind us, and somebody apparently beating some dead chicken to further death, it sounds like. But there's lots of pictures of Hollywood folk with Danielle, and I see that connections very often. He really gets a sense of the show, which is awesome.
I guess we should say that we're in one of the great power table dining rooms of not just this city, but certainly America and maybe even this continent. Here we are at the Skybox, which also doubles as Danielle's office, but is his showcase table for guests who want to see the whole back of the house experience, and one of the most legendary tables I think in all of New York.
I agree, and but to be fair, it doubles as a dining room. It's really his office that doubles as a dining room.
It's really amazing.
Last night, for instance, we had to take up the blinds behind this table so we could do a tableside carving because there was 5 people in here and we couldn't fit a gearing.
Wow,
it's pretty cool.
It's amazing because I used to work here several years ago, and coming back here, it's almost like going back to the high school that you used to go to, and in fact that same phenomenon where everything seems smaller than it does in memory. In memory, this is a huge space, but it's actually quite cozy and intimate in reality.
Well, you've grown quite a bit.
I've grown, yeah. I've just gotten bigger since several years ago since I was here. So Raj, tell us a little bit about where you came from to get to this point. What were some of the restaurants or some of the people that you worked with before now?
When I started my career in restaurants, prior to starting my career in wine, I was a cook, a line cook. I would never claim that I was a chef because I was not creative in any sense and not particularly good at what I did, but I loved it and I worked very hard.
Sounds like a good front of the house employee to me.
Exactly. Somebody said to me the other day that there's many occasions where chefs end up in the dining room, but almost no occasions where the opposite is true.
That's funny.
It goes to speak for the level of skill required, and why I have so much respect for what happens in the kitchen, because I know how difficult it is, and I know I can't do it, which is a great basis for me offering respect. So I started out as a cook in mostly casual, simple restaurants. The first restaurant I ever worked in was a bagel shop. I was most successful as a cook there because everything was pretty evenly described as to what had to happen, and the recipes were quite intact. I worked in diners, casual restaurants, Spanish restaurants, and such. Eventually, I realized I really loved food and it was a focus, but I wasn't necessarily interested in doing this professionally. I became a waiter at some point and worked both sides. Eventually, while I was in college, I got a job working at a garden which supplied a restaurant in New Jersey.
Oh, wow.
A restaurant called the Ryland Inn. It was on a 40-acre property, and there was 10 acres devoted to the garden. 5 acres of which were planted, the rest was forageable land. And I worked in the garden. I actually worked gratis in exchange for strawberries, leeks, and other good, delicious
vegetables. Pretty amazing.
Indeed, it was great, and I got to work outside, and my boss was very, very cool. I worked with this awesome Costa Rican guy who was the hardest working, smiling man I've ever seen. Anyway, I got exposed to chefs this way. The chefs from the restaurant, but also because Craig Shelton, who was the chef and proprietor of the inn, he really was well networked, and he was a fairly famous chef in his time, and very well known. And he's still cooking and still doing a great job of bringing the farm and the table very close to each other. Now in Texas, he's out in Texas now. Well, at any rate, many visiting chefs would come to the kitchen there, and so every day at about 3:30 or 4 o'clock, cooks would come from. You see the white caps start coming out of the kitchen, walking down through this big open prairie towards the garden, and you see them coming and be like, all right, well, it's time for their cigarette break, where they pretend to pick the herbs. Well, they come down, and people would say to me sometimes, okay, where's the best mint, or where should I pick lemon thyme now? And I knew the garden fairly well. There was lots of patches of things everywhere, so I got to talking with the chefs and made some friends along the way. Eventually, I asked for a job in the restaurant, having worked in the front of the house in other restaurants, nothing that formal. I got a job as a food runner, and within 2 months, I became a captain at the restaurant. 3 months later, I was offered a job as a sommelier.
Just goes to show that if you're a talented person, that the industry will find a good role for you, because we always need talented people.
It's all about luck and timing. I believe that the universe is truly that way. I just happened to be there at the right time. They needed a waiter who had a good command of English and was capable of thinking. And
those are two things I associate with you.
Indeed, I am capable of thinking on occasion. Literally, they lost a sommelier. They had no other prospects, and I was very interested. So the chef came to me one night and said, I understand that you would like to learn more about wine. He was very wine knowledgeable. He is very wine knowledgeable.
Always a good wine program.
It was an incredible. Well, I actually, again, it's a question of timing. He offered me the job. I said, I think I would love to learn about wine. The next day I came to work and they had me penned in as a sommelier. I said, Chef, I don't know anything about wine. He's like, well, you better learn fast.
Yeah.
With a few expletives in that sentence.
You have approximately,
12 seconds. Unfortunately for that restaurant, but fortunately for me, it was also a kind of a tight time in the economy. It was post-2001, and business was down.
Okay.
It was a rough time, and it was a big restaurant with a lot of overhead. Just turning on the electricity or the heat in that in the old inn was expensive on a daily basis, and so if the numbers were down, they didn't have a lot of cash flow. So, being that they had a huge and impressive cellar and they always did tasting menus with pairings, he said to me, "Don't buy any wine. Use stuff from the cellar. Ask me before you open bottles for things, but we can put them on the menus." And when we had great stocks of things.
So you're serving mature wine regularly?
Constantly.
That's awesome.
It was really incredible.
Talk about timing.
I mean, I had an epiphany once with a bottle. I was like, well, there's like 40 bottles of this, chef. Maybe it'll work. He's like, it might be too sweet. Have a look. It was I still remember. It's Christoffel, Würzige Würzgarten, they said 3-star, 1976.
Wow.
And
those wines were killer.
They're amazing. I had no experience with old German wine, so I took the foil off, and it's like totally covered in mold, and it stinks. It stinks to high heaven. It's blue cheese gone bad in the worst possible sock drawer you can imagine. And I'm like, well, this is not going to be good. I like wipe off the top. I pull the cork out and crumbles because I have no idea what I'm doing, obviously. Pour a little bit of this golden stuff on. I'm looking at it and I'm just like, all right. He's like, well, smell it. See if it's any good. I put my nose into it and I was lost. And it was over.
Alice in Wonderland, down the hole.
I had to do this for the rest of my life.
That's right. That's a great
And I got
story.
to pour that with a hot foie gras course in the middle of the gourmand tasting menu for like 7 weeks. The lucky tourists that happened to walk in that restaurant in that period. And actually, today I would never do that because I think a wine like that, when you pour it by the glass, is only one little bit of it. You're not doing the wine or the guest any favors because they really only see a snapshot. At the time,
a Polaroid of Guernica. It's like you just took that small spot.
Exactly. So today I would never do that. But at the time it was a great experience for me, and I got to taste every bottle for weeks and weeks. Amazing. 50, 60 bottles of it. And we did things like that all the time.
Did you have people just lose it? Did you have I
had a lot of people get pretty excited.
Oh my!
Well, the wine community in New Jersey got wind that the restaurant wasn't doing great, and that the people were opening bottles. So definitely, we had people who knew what they were doing, enjoying some of the stuff there for sure. But there was a great wine list. There was over 750 selections, which was pretty extensive, especially for that time.
For a first gig out. Too.
Exactly. Oh, it was a huge program for me, and I learned so much, and I had such a great time. I worked with some great chefs who we would visit there. I mean, while I was still working in the garden, I remember this tall English fellow came to me and said to me, "I'll take all of the lemon balm." The lemon balm patch was about the size of this table. It's in the mid family. They were about this high. Yeah, we're talking about enough lemon balm to kill somebody, right. To embalm somebody. And I said, "Oh, okay, sure thing." I took the basket from him. Like he'd given me 4 baskets. I just picked a quarter of it, went back to the kitchen, dropped it off, came back to the garden. 30 minutes later, he came back down. No, I want all the lemon balm. This turns out to be Paul Liebrandt cooking a menu with the chef. He was in between restaurants way back then. This was probably 2002.
They used to have that guest chef series. That's right.
Yeah, exactly. And they hit Paul and Craig did a dinner called the Great Chef's Dinner, where they reinterpreted dishes from the great chefs of Europe.
Such a great idea for Paul.
It was amazing. It was a really great dinner. Yeah. And he did that. That wasn't for the dinner, the lemon balm, but he did like a foie gras with the lemon balm, and I tasted it working in the restaurant 2 to 3 days later. I was wrong. It's a good idea to harvest all the lemon balm. Anyway, it'll grow back the next day. Well, anyway, so those were my beginnings. I left the Rhode Island Inn in 2004 after doing some traveling, and at any rate, I think the number was up for that restaurant, so it was time to move on. I moved to the West Coast, and I worked for a winery briefly. I worked for an importing company. I did a little bit of work in a restaurant out there. Mostly surfed and enjoyed California. Got exposed to California wines for the first time, which was an important thing for me because I've been and I think we in New York are so Eurocentric about everything from coffee to wine to bread, and without having spent time there, I wouldn't have tasted the wines. I wouldn't know how to taste the wines. I probably wouldn't have ever found a taste for them, and I'm really glad that I did, because in fact, some of the great wines I've had in my youth, even before the Rhode Island Inn, were from California. My uncle lives there, has been collecting wines from Ridge for years.
Certainly,
those are the first real wines I've ever tasted. After California.